This is John Martinka with Martinka Consulting, and I am here today with Michelle Bomberger. And Michelle is an attorney that I've worked on quite a few deals with, mutual clients. She is the CEO and managing attorney of Equinox business law firm in Bellevue, Washington. And thank you for doing this, Michelle.
Sure, John. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. So first of all, before we talk about anything with buy-sell deals, what are you seeing from your existing clients? The good, the bad, the we're doing okay kind of thing?
Yeah, well, there's sort of the obvious businesses that really got hit hard because of their dependence on physical locations and customers coming in the door. And those guys are continuing to try to navigate what's next. I mean, are we open? Are we closed? Are we partially open? And that's a huge challenge, of course. The companies that are doing well, are obviously ones that could shift pretty quickly. They're agile, their people can work from home, and they had cash reserves and strong leadership. I mean, all those things are kind of the pieces of the puzzle that seem to come together for success. The people part of this, in addition to the cash part of this, I think are really the factors that have made a big difference. How do we manage to pay people? Because we don't want to let them go. So we had a whole lot of issues around, the unemployment benefits, the leave benefits, and then now bringing people back. What does that look like? What kind of policies should we put in place? And then the work from home component that is, continuing to be a work in progress for most businesses. So those are big areas that folks are talking about.
Yeah. So you touched on, I guess, would fall under HR people things. What about the small business and protecting themselves and their employees, their employees from the virus, but themselves from any lawsuits and claims, etc.? What's your advice to business owners?
Yeah, without giving specific legal advice, I would say that we don't really know how liability is going to play out in this scenario. I mean, generally speaking, an employer is not liable for someone getting sick in the workplace. However, COVID has created an entirely different mindset and in some ways obligation for the employer to take action to protect their employees. Obviously, OSHA and WISHA are your core regulatory structures for Washington businesses, but really it comes down to ensuring that you understand what the rules are, which are constantly changing, and implementing policies that reflect those rules. Being sure that you're communicating them, being sure that you really understand and you have a written policy that everybody has seen, put it in languages that are appropriate for your workforce, and making sure that you address violations. We're hearing from a lot of businesses where folks don't, want to participate in kind of the required sanitation or mask wearing, or if you're ill, you don't come to work. Well, they're ill, they come to work anyway. So as a business owner, you need to really have those policies well documented and a plan for addressing them if someone is violating them.
Okay, great. Thank you. As you've talked to your clients, and obviously some of them have been deeply affected by this in a negative way, are you seeing a trend towards, hey, we're going to gut this out, we're going to rebuild, or do you think it's going to push more of them to want to sell?
I think there's a lot of fatigue right now, and I think that really plays into folks' mindset about where they are. We all know that business owners are highly attached to their businesses. I mean, this is legacy, this is life's work, this is labor of love. And so it's very difficult, I think, to sort of say, let's just, wipe the slate clean and walk away. However, I've heard a number of people who have actually, sold in the past and said, I'm so glad I'm not an employer right now. And I think that, folks who are kind of at that place of trying to decide, maybe they were thinking about selling or thinking about shifting to do something else, this is a good time to say, I'm tired. Let's just not continue. But I think the vast majority of business owners who have businesses that are well structured, that have a strong market presence, a strong brand presence, will rebuild if they can.
Yeah, yeah. We've actually have 3 clients right now who are looking at growing by acquisition, looking for people in their industry. And I think for a lot of these companies that were hurt, that's their best option because the financial buyer isn't going to be too enthused about that.
Right.
So and that's a good segue. What are you seeing in the buy-sell world?
I don't feel like we've seen a lot of change. I mean, a lot of the deals that we've been looking at over the last few months have been deals in the works, folks who have been talking to each other for a while, who know each other. And so that confidence of the deal remains. I think, as you mentioned, you've got these opportunistic buyers as well. And those are just deals that are going to happen because of the timing and the marketplace. So I don't see a lot of change there. I think for new deals and new transactions, and I'm sure you have insight onto this as well, because of the virtual nature of relationships, I think it makes it more difficult to build trust. It makes it more difficult to make a deal come together because you're not sitting across the table, walking through the plant, seeing all the employees, whatever that is, it looks different. And I think the relationship building for new deals is more difficult.
I agree 100%. And in fact, I will put in a little something here. I was approved as an essential business to have in-person meetings, small in-person meetings, as long as it's at the facility. So no, and even this actually happened when there was a complete shutdown. So, but you're right, it is taking an effect. That is one of the big changes due to COVID. You seeing any changes in deal structure?
Not directly. I mean, I feel like the deals that are going quickly are smaller deals. So things that just sort of come about and happen quickly. They don't require the owner to remain. So again, going back to that trust issue, that to me is sort of where I've seen the most impact. Folks who are getting into bigger deals, I feel there's more conversation around understanding dependencies. And so what does the next 6 months look like for that business? And that dependency and understanding of, if we're closed for another 6 months, if we're partially open, what does this business look like in various COVID scenarios? And that, I haven't seen it directly put into a deal, but I think it's influencing how people are talking about purchase price and purchase terms.
Yeah, in other words, maybe an earn out or something for short term to make sure that it does keep coming back, etc. Yeah. Okay. Really, just got a couple more questions. And the last one is just going to be on anything else you're seeing differently. But the next one is legal due diligence during the COVID era. We know what other due diligence, customers and financial and the employees, et cetera. But what about on the legal side? Are you doing anything differently?
Yeah, I think where we see more attention is on contract terms. So where folks just were looking to, get the contracts assigned or get the new contracts signed after closing, there is more attention being spent on force majeure as the classic example right now of what does it say? How do I get out of this contract? And I think that goes to kind of bigger supply chain questions. So looking at the customer base, looking at the supplier base, and what are our options and what flexibility do we have within our contracts to move, to shift. Similarly with leases, paying attention to, is this a good opportunity to negotiate lease terms that are beneficial, more beneficial than what's in the current lease? So rather than trying to assume a lease, getting a new one instead. So I think it's the contract terms that are really driving changes in the due diligence process.
Okay. What about, and you mentioned leases, what about from the landlord side? Are you having clients who are going, oh, I may not get as much as I thought based on what I paid for the building.
Yeah, it's a huge struggle. It really is. And, you know, as I'm sure you're aware, and probably most of the folks watching this are aware, there's very little wiggle room in leases to get a concession. So the lease terms themselves are probably not going to get you to any lease concessions. So the conversation, I think, is much more about, you know, who's your landlord? What do they need? What does their business look like? Where are you within kind of size and leverage in that building or in that space, and open that dialogue. I think folks are having more success with a cash buyout, to say, okay, we've got 12 months left. I want out. What if I pay you 6 months now and let's make a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen some success with that, but it really is more, you know, person to person than legal leverage going into those conversations.
Okay. So final thing, it gives you a chance to add whatever you would like to add, but you know, what are, you know, just generally buyers of businesses, sellers of businesses, what are you seeing that they're doing differently? Plus any other insights you'd like to offer?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's an opportunity for, you know, buyers to be a bit more conscientious, I think, in their due diligence process, as we talked about. And whether they're all doing that or not, I think it's an opportunity to really understand the businesses that they're getting into to buy. On the seller side, I think there's a real emphasis on building infrastructure and focusing on infrastructure. So what do we need to do to, you know, shore up our operations, to cut costs, to have clear policies, so that, again, and this is always the case, that we look nice to a buyer when they walk in the door. But because for a lot of companies it is slower, there is an opportunity to spend time and money in shoring up the business. Other things that I feel are, you know, opportunities right now are for businesses to take a hard look at, you know, what really was the impact and why did it happen to your business the way that it did. You know, you've heard the saying, you know, we're all, you know, in the same storm but not in the same boat, right? This has affected so many businesses in such vastly different ways. So looking at what were the true impacts and what could you have in place as a business to mitigate some of those impacts next time. You know, when you dig down, the impacts are not that much different than any other natural disaster. They feel really different, but they're not in a lot of cases. So what business continuity planning, what cash reserves, what insurance, what contract terms, really taking a look at what we could do to have a stronger business for the next time, whether it's similar or different on the surface, the impacts are often the same.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. I share a friend of mine who does crisis management, disaster planning, and that he told me that he would cover everything. He never covered a worldwide pandemic. So,
right.
Yeah, it's going to be some new thoughts. So, Michelle, thank you very much. Again, this is John Martinka with Michelle Bomberger with Equinox Business Law in Bellevue, Washington.